So here's some examples of tasks that ChatGPT does well in. Question and answer, like asking ChatGPT to ask you questions to probe into. So even for example, if you have a draft and you're like, it's reading really flat to me in this particular area, or I need to add more nuance about some aspect, ask me questions, like you're telling ChatGPT, ask me questions to help me do that. And then ChatGPT comes up with very useful, insightful questions, which you could then answer right then, or you could take it to a voice transcript. This session, thanks for joining, everybody, is about ChatGPT behind the curtain. Um, and I would love to kind of hear if you want to think about kind of the warnings or the fears or things you've heard about ChatGPT. I know that that's a huge topic right now, and we're going to kind of dive into some of those, pitfalls. If you've heard of source hallucinations, plagiarism concerns, plagiarism detectors, just drop it in the chat. I would love to kind of hear, or you can just unmute yourself and tell us. Maybe we should do that instead, because we're just starting that. Let's just do that. Does anybody have any specific concerns or questions to make sure that we address them or things you're curious about in this session? Because we're going to be really
Um,
interactive.
I think one of my biggest concerns is the plagiarism checker. Um, Knowing that I'm putting my own words in there and just asking it to like rearrange it into something that makes sense, or it's a little more concise, that would somehow set off a plagiarism um, detector and say that I just got all of my work from ChatGPT when really it was me the whole time.
Got you. Yes, great question. So plagiarism checkers are definitely a big topic, and a lot of content is failing detectors that is not AI generated, is what I'm hearing about from other freelancers and writers and researchers and things. Where so these detectors are getting false positives, and then that's a huge issue. So great question, Megan, and we'll kind of dive into that. It's not a clear cut answer that I have for you, so I'll just tell you that like right from the start, but I'm going to tell you about how to strategize to make sure that you're using this as an enhancement and not a replacement for your writing. Any other questions or things that might be scary about, you might be interested in using chat GPT but afraid of the pitfalls or limitations? That's what we're here to do, is to really dive into those and explain them so that you can feel confident that you know what those are, and be able
Worried
to use them.
about using like confidential like client information on there. Like, yeah, I just steer clear from like inputting any client information. And also, so you've been talking a lot on LinkedIn about using voice, I guess like speech to text. So
Mhm.
I'm curious to hear about that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so confidential information, definitely a concern. I don't think I had that in my outline, but that's a great point. So let's just cover that topic right now while you brought it up. So yes, definitely, if you have confidential information like data or obviously like people's personal information or things like that, you definitely don't want to put that into just same similar how you wouldn't like email it in your Gmail account or your personal email. Or if you're hesitating, then that's a good indicator that no, right? Like don't put that information into Chat GPT. Some strategies might be using, like, say that most of it is not confidential information, but there's just certain parts or something like that. You can use like a placeholder, for example, using like the pound sign a few times and then putting placeholder in between, and then just explaining to Chat GPT, this is a placeholder that I'm going to um, fill in later. So just leave it this way to remind me. And then you can go back and add that info later. That's one way to kind of blind Chat GPT to what you don't want it to see. Um, and a lot of bigger companies are developing, like you may see more and more where they have enterprise level, like um, platforms, accounts, or subscriptions that they want you to use that's just for internal purposes or things like that. So it's definitely still something that is going to be increasingly integrated into the tools and the platforms, the everything you already use. So everything from like Gmail, calendars, Google searching, um, I don't know, Netflix, who knows? These are going to be kind of less and less, I believe, separate tools and separate logins and separate things you have to learn, and increasingly actually just baked into what you're doing already. So I think it's of great benefit to kind of understand the big picture, and that's what we're going to do here with Behind the Curtain, is understand how it works and how it doesn't work. And I think that's the biggest key that I've seen when it comes to issues like plagiarism and source hallucination, is that the better I've developed an understanding of what ChatGPT actually does, the less that I have those problems, because I'm not asking it to do things that you shouldn't ask it to do. I'm not trying to use a hammer as a screwdriver. And so that's what we're here to do. And in doing so, then you're able to apply it more effectively. And then the other thing that you touched on was about speech to text writing, which I'm obsessed with. I've been a speech to text like avid fan for years before ChatGPT. I first started doing this in 2020. So at that time, I was just using, what I discovered is that I could use a voice recorder, and then I was doing like, I believe, a transcribe to text function in Google Documents, where I would play my recording to like next to the speaker of my computer and watch it transcribe, even though there was no punctuation and it did a terrible job. It was not that accurate. It was so fast, and it was the thing that excited me so much is that I was able to get mass amounts of information that I had kind of around my head for years into words. And that actually set me off on the path of medical writing, was that experience and realizing, oh wow, like I can get this stuff out, and that if I can develop my writing skills without the use of speech to text, then I could be able to, or like being able to process it. So fast forward to now, when all of that is kind of taken care of for me. And not only that, I can build in prompts to my transcripts. And so that's kind of what I've been talking about on LinkedIn and sharing more about. And if we want to talk about that in this session, we certainly can. So like the cool thing about that, like for example, if I shared on LinkedIn the other day about um, an editing project that I was doing, and actually it was just updating my resume. That was the project. And so what I did is I was looking at my old resume on my phone, and I walked around my house looking at it. And you know how when you're editing and you see things and then you see more and more and more, like really, really fast, you might see 10 things in a very short amount of time, kind of a burst of insight, like this is what needs to happen. What's so frustrating for me when I'm editing on a screen is that I will start doing the first thing, and then I feel like I'm going to forget the other nine things, because I will get distracted in the mechanics of editing that first thing. But that first pass, like that first fresh, you know, insight that I have is usually the best ideas that I have, because it's kind of my first impression about this is what I want to do. So what I did was just say all of that as fast as I saw it, as fast as I thought about it, and I worked to be as detailed as possible in what I was saying. Feel comfortable taking long pauses. Sometimes I pause for like 2 minutes while I think about something, rather than just continuing to talk because I know I'm not really sure what I want to do. During my transcript, I would say things like, Chat GPT, add a placeholder here to remind me about this thing. I want to add a link to my portfolio, the new one, or something like that. And so then those were all part of the follow-up questions. So within the transcript, I was giving prompts. And I believe I started my transcript with, I'm about to update my resume. I'm giving you a voice transcript. I'm going to tell you several things to do. And I want you to ask me questions about anything that's unclear before implementing them. And before you do anything, I want you to give me a list summarizing everything I said to change, so that I can review it and make sure that's what I meant. And, you know, I don't know, it's something along those lines. And so then I made my transcript. And the cool part is that I don't think I did the admin. Yeah, I didn't do it immediately afterward. So all I have to do is take my transcript and copy and paste it into ChatGPT, and I don't have to remember like anything I said because it's all right there, including the instructions to ChatGPT. I mean, it was pretty exhilarating, I have to say, when I realized that I could use ChatGPT for technical editing, if that makes sense. Like, not just like changing the voice or the tone, but like actually specifically adding, like there was work experience I was adding. So I was able to say like this date to this date, I want a, you know, to state my experience about this and about this and about this. That to me was a lot different than editing like an article where I'm trying to, for readability or for whatever. It was like it made me not able to sleep, realizing the possibilities, like to be able to work like that without having to rely on a full keyboard or a big screen, and being able to give voice input that has prompting embedded into it. So that's kind of along those lines. And I see some of y'all are putting comments here. This is great. Yes, it is a neurospicy dream. I love it. Yes, Megan. Okay, any questions about that before we kind of dive into some like do's and don'ts and what's actually happening? Okay, so I'm going to, maybe I should just share my screen here. Okay, can you guys see that okay? All right, so this is my Notion. And this is actually like what I use for a lot of personal organization. And my speech to text is through a template. And if you're interested in that, I can give you the info. It's like a template that I use for Notion, but there's like a workflow that allows you to have your notes directly. I'll show you what that looks like just while we're on here. I don't even know what's on my Notion, so you might be like, why am I putting this on the recording? But okay. So like, for example, in my notes, in my note inbox, it will, I don't have one here right now, but it's, sorry, being super slow. So for example, I had probably this happened like at midnight or something when I was geeking out. I decided that I wanted to talk about how speech to text writing allows me to connect into like embodied sensations a lot easier than typing. So how it feels, because when you're talking, you feel it in your chest, you feel it in your body, you know whether you're being authentic or honest or not, and what that means, like related to um, things that I noticed when I was a yoga teacher or whatever. So it's just kind of a stream of consciousness. And I did this whole voice transcript. And what happens is it shows up with a little robot icon to tell me that this is a speech to text transcription. I'll show you the full page just if you're curious about my system. I've used other systems, but this is what I'm using now because here like it costs 7 cents for this duration to transcribe it because it's using my ChatGPT API. It gives me a summary, and then it has the whole transcript here, and then it has main points, potential action items, follow-up questions, like how much it cost. It's pretty phenomenal. So that's part of why I've been obsessed. So that's just a little detour about speech to text, which, um, yeah, maybe we can do another thing. But now we're going to come back to um, the behind the curtain. So, okay. So ChatGPT's mechanics and functionality. Large language models and machine learning, the way that those work, it's not like a search engine. How many of you have just kind of like raise your hand? How many of you have heard that ChatGPT is not a Google search? And I hope you have. Okay, because it's not. And I think that is a big part of how we have to kind of retrain ourselves because we're so used to Google searching. This is very different. The closest thing that most of us are really familiar with is autocomplete. You know how that's built into like different platforms, and it kind of, if you're starting to type a Gmail email and it kind of suggests like the words that it thinks you're about to say, and it can be helpful. It's like that autocomplete, but artificial intelligence autocomplete. That's essentially how it works. So, for example, if you type in the sentence "once upon a blank," it's not going to say "once upon an elephant." It's probably going to say "once upon a time," because statistically, that's like the most likely way that that sentence would be completed. Essentially, that's how it works on like kind of the fundamental core level, but it's extrapolated to, you know, much more than that. Um, so as a result, it's can be limited in understanding context and nuances. This isn't it doesn't like really understand what it's doing. So in knowing that, you're going to be able to leverage it a lot more effectively. So here's some examples of tasks that ChatGPT does well in. Um, Question and answer, like asking ChatGPT to ask you questions to probe into. So even for example, if you have a draft and you're like, it's reading really flat to me in this particular area, or I need to add more nuance about some aspect, or I want things to be more of a story. Ask me questions, like you're telling ChatGPT, ask me questions to help me do that. And then ChatGPT comes up with very useful, insightful questions, which you could then answer right then, or you could take it to a voice transcript and you could just answer the questions. Just what I would do if I were going to do that is say, this is a voice transcript, and I'm going to answer the questions you asked me. And then I would state the question and then state my answer, for example. Sometimes I would even do things there, like saying, I think I've read a study about this and I want to insert some statistics about this aspect. Put a placeholder here or like a follow-up question to remind me I need to add that or something so that I can just stay with my stream of consciousness. Or I could stop right there in the middle of it and look it up and put it there if I wanted to. So it can be, and then I could take my entire transcript and then just paste that into the same chat. So it's keeping track of what we're doing, and it can be really great. Another example of ChatGPT that does really well is initial outlines. How many of us have used ChatGPT for generating ideas, brainstorming, outlining, that kind of thing? Yay, happy to hear it. Okay, great. Everybody I could see, at least on the screen, raise their hand, and that makes me really happy. It's phenomenal for that. I don't see any reason to not use that because it's, for me, very helpful, just kind of jump starting that step. It doesn't mean that you have to use that. It just can be like a helpful structure framework to get you going. Summarizing complex medical research papers. How many have used ChatGPT for that? Like just, for example, pasting in a really complex abstract and saying, explain it to me like very simply. It can be really, really great for that. Or, you know, I've done like an entire, I'm like, I don't want to read this whole thing. And I only want to know what's relevant to me. So I can say, here's an entire, you know, article. Extract the key points that are relevant to XYZ purpose and summarize them in bulleted list, um, you know, or something along those lines, whatever format that I want. And that's really great. So, how many, just kind of like show of hands or in the chat, is anybody using the paid Chat GPT? Or so the 4 instead of the 3.5. Megan, yay. Anybody else? Liz, great. Okay. If you want to unmute, I would love to kind of hear what your thoughts are on the difference and the quality between the 3.5, which is the free version, and the 4.
I never used the 3.5, so I don't know that I can speak to that because I wanted to try Dolly. So I went straight to the paid version so I could start playing with that.
Okay, great.
I don't know that I really noticed the difference because I don't know if you could do this on the 3.5, but when I got the 4, I I went to like the bottom where you could put in a description of like your business or whatever it is that you're looking for, so that every time it answers, it goes back to that original description. So it always has that in mind. So it was using it to help me come up with like email pitches or thinking about stuff for my website or stuff like that. And when I was asking it for like stuff for like the patient brochure I was working on, when I would ask it questions or to help me come up with an outline, it always kind of brought it back to the description of the business and my like description of my personality. I don't know if
Love it.
3.5 does that, but I did it when I got the 4.
Love it. That's a great idea, Megan. Yeah, 3.5 does not have, as far as I know, those kinds of capabilities. I'll show you. This is the, whoops, the 4. There's a Canva integration too. You can say things like design an infographic to show this, and this, and there's all the text on it, and it will do that. I don't know if you guys want to see that, or I can show you Dolly, or if you want, if anybody wants to see that. But so ChatGPT 4 can look at links. You can say, summarize this article. Here's a link. Sometimes it can see it, sometimes it cannot. It can it can access the internet, okay? But have to be really careful with that, like as opposed to 3.5, which cannot, because it's still not, there's much better options for AI powered search engines if you're looking for a search engine. An example of that would be Perplexity. I haven't used it a whole lot. The writing in Perplexity is not great in my opinion, but the searching is fantastic. It can do things like give you multiple links. It's kind of like what you would do on the first page of Google search results, already done. So like the most relevant links, it can summarize information and then put like sources for where it found that. So it can kind of give you a more complete answer with sources. So Perplexity is an example, but I think that we're going to see more and more of that kind of AI power in searching. So that's kind of the key thing that I want you to remember, is that it's not a search engine. Okay, so other things here we said, so like patient education materials, how many have used ChatGPT to like change the reading level or tone or repurpose something? Awesome. Yeah, Megan. So for example, if you're trying to write like a lay audience friendly article with something really complex, or maybe multiple complex sources, you can do something like, here's 3 abstracts. I want to include them in an article for this audience, and I want you to look at them, and then don't write the article, just make me an outline. And going in bite size like that, is you're going to get much better results. Similar to how you would probably get much better results if you're doing that with, say, like a really smart, undergrad research assistant. You don't want them to do the whole project. You want them to just do part of it and then be like, here's what I think I should do. What do you think? So that you can give human feedback at every step. And that's really what I've learned, that reduces a lot of the problems that people talk about. Um, Simplifying medical data for better understanding, generating ideas for topics and like headlines, key, like catchy phrases, better transitions, and that kind of thing. Rosalba, what raised your hand?
Yeah, sorry, I just have a question. So when you're saying about like giving it abstracts or papers, do you copy paste the whole abstract or the whole paper and tell it to read it, or do you just provide links and then it goes to like get the
Um,
information?
Great question. Yeah. So ChatGPT, the free one, 3.5, you would need to paste because it can't find it. With 4, it depends. Sometimes I've pasted the link, but I found that sometimes it just doesn't work as well, or doesn't seem to like get it or be as accurate sometimes. So, and often I'm not like, if I'm like wanting to summarize something, I'm usually not needing to summarize like a huge amount of text. So I personally tend to do a copy and paste thing there. We're going to do future sessions with some tools that are better at, if you're like reading an entire PDF or like a dense medical study where you can kind of read it with a artificial intelligence copilot designed for that. So the tool that I have used that I like for that is called SciSpace. Um, and it allows you to talk to a PDF of a medical study, um, or ask questions. It has like many, it's. I think we might have looked at it really briefly in the last session. I can't remember, but yeah, that one is the one that I would use there. Great question. So just kind of whatever works for you. I think I don't know that there's like a better way or worse. But I think that the tools are also evolving so quickly. So I think that increasingly these things are going to be built into the platforms we're already using, like the website you're already on, or like on PubMed, or wherever where it's already there, right? I think it's helpful to know the context and how it's working. Um, so ethical considerations and best practices. So plagiarism. I've seen many like freelancers talking about, like content writers, not necessarily only in medical writing, talking about plagiarism, and a lot of companies are using completely AI generated content. There's been a lot of headlines about like ChatGPT, Dolly, and others that are kind of using like the copyright question. For example, artists that are painters and then Dolly using their work to take part of it and then make it part of something else. And then who really owns that? Um, there was a New York Times thing I was reading about where ChatGPT reproduced like very closely to a New York Times article. So definitely, um, a huge issue for the work we do. You never want to get in a bind and use ChatGPT and pass it off as your own writing. It would be worse than just asking for an extension, because that's your livelihood, right? So how it happens, its potential to inadvertently reproduce text is very similar to that like autocomplete situation. So if especially if you're talking about a topic that there might not be as much content about out there in the world. So if you're talking about something like really general, such as like diabetes self-management practices or something, there's probably who knows how many thousands and thousands of pieces of content to draw from. But if you're talking about something really specific, it is possible that it could take words, phrases, sentences, or more from that text, and you wouldn't know about it. So again, that's why I highly recommend not like relying on ChatGPT. It's not to replace you. That's where you're going to get into that issue. Um, yeah, prevention, human oversight. There are plagiarism detection tools. I have not looked at them so extensively. I know there's a lot in academia right now with students turning in papers and then professors accusing students of plagiarism based on plagiarism detection tools, even though they haven't used them. And I believe I've seen research that it's unfairly like targeting English language learners, which is really sad to me, or people who are writing in a language that's not their own, especially if they're writing sentences and then like using ChatGPT to improve the writing. I would say like the biggest thing is to use it very bite size, like, and very targeted, specific to what you're doing, like one phrase, one sentence at a time sometimes, and making sure that you don't let it do thinking for you. And that can be easy to slip into that because it's like very enticing, like, oh, okay, that sounds pretty good, or that's already done, and to see that, but like it won't go well, right? And it can, and you'll have to figure out like a way that works for you. But I think that that's the key, is bite-sized prompting that's very specific and targeted, especially in technical writing. Well, I guess in creative or any other kind of writing as well. Um, any other questions about plagiarism before we go on to source hallucination? Okay, so bottom line is Don't use ChatGPT and call it your own writing. And be very, very thoughtful and careful about how you use ChatGPT and why and which stages that you use it. Um, Another tip that I shared on LinkedIn that, so that's the downside, right? So I think that we don't often talk as much about the upside because, as you know, much of like the health content out there is kind of rewording and rephrasing things that already exist. Like if you look at a common condition and you Google, say, like multiple sclerosis, and you look at the top results, is probably going to be like WebMD, Johns Hopkins, Cleveland Clinic, or huge content platforms like that have tons and tons of content. So they have that domain authority. And if you look at the differences between those articles, or maybe even work with clients that will give you like examples of competitor um, content, there you'll see. I mean, there's only so many ways you can say the same things, right? Like there's only, and it's. I mean, obviously they're going to really aim to distinguish themselves and be different, but you're kind of hitting the same things, right? So I think that what's cool about ChatGPT, and to come back to what I was saying that I was sharing about, is like, for example, if you have a unique perspective or topic that you want to infuse more of your like kind of different idea or different perspective or personal, I don't know if it would be like opinions, or maybe it's more like, something that doesn't exist. What is great about ChatGPT is you can ask it to prompt you for questions to make that. So you could say, okay, here's my outline that maybe ChatGPT helps you write. Now ask me questions to make this less generic and more authentic and more original. Like, help me identify where I can do that within this outline, and then ask me questions to do that. And then you may or may not want to answer those questions, or you may find like 5 of the 10 are really, really interesting. And then you could take it to speech to text, or you could just answer them right there, And if you're really specific with what your goal is, as specific as how you want to use that information, giving that context can be really powerful, because then ChatGPT understands what you're trying to do. You could even say, I'm concerned that this is really generic. I want to make sure that I don't want to plagiarize. So I want to make sure my voice and exact phrasing and words comes through as much as possible. And I don't want you to change it. I just want you to make it like readable and have correct grammar. And then I'm going to look at it and then tell you what to do. So we're going to do this in steps. You can even be as specific as that with ChatGPT, and it will understand what you're saying and probably commend you for doing so or something. And it's like, okay, cool. You can even ask for, if you're not sure how to prompt, you can say, this is ultimately what I'm trying to accomplish. How should I prompt you? How can we make that happen? And ChatGPT can give you suggestions. So actually, I think a lot of these things I might have learned through things like that and been like, I'm trying to do this. What should I do? And then trying something and being like, do you think, same with like the asking questions. I was like, do you think this is a good strategy? Why or why not? Like for prompting. I mean, that's really helpful. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just ask ChatGPT. And it can be like a helpful way to just find your own way. Depends also on the type of writing you do and your preferences there. So great questions. So source hallucination, we'll cover that somewhat. This is, okay, so source hallucination. Show of hands, how many have heard of this term of like hallucinating sources? Okay, great. So what that means is that ChatGPT will sometimes, I was trying to generate like a really good example and I didn't get a really clear one. Has anybody experienced source hallucination using ChatGPT? Okay, so what it means is that if say that you were asking, like you were working on a project, or I don't know, like to give an example, say that you were like, write an article for patients about such and such condition. And it will sometimes give you references that are actually not real. They're like completely imagined, made up. They will sound real. It will confidently say this is the source of that information. Here's a DOI. Here's an abstract, study authors, like it published in this journal. Things that sound like really specific. Like, why would you, like, where does that even come from? I don't know. The bottom line is that I would just never, like, I know people talk about that a lot, but for me, it's a non-issue because, and I imagine it probably is from all of you as well, because, like, why would you, like, you would look it up and then see it's wrong, right? Like, so I don't understand why, like, to me, I think that this maybe has to do more with, like, maybe people in other industries where that could be an issue that people might actually use that source. But I just cannot imagine a scenario where I would do that, even if it was like not chat, even if it was like designed for medical research, I would never just not read the thing myself and then put it in my document. So like anytime I see information that would be something I would want to read myself, and I'll even tell ChatGPT and say, I don't want your, like, don't put information like that. Just, or I'll, I guess it depends on the context, but I will say, like, that was not true, and I don't want you to include anything. An example of that would be, actually, ChatGPT wrote this entire outline based on a voice transcript. And this, ChatGPT wrote this, which is the description. So I can give you an example of how I did that and then come back to the hallucination. So like here, this description about like what we're doing here. I took another webinar pop-up description and I said something along the lines of, I want to make a pop-up webinar description. This is going to be the title of it. These are going to be kind of the goals. And I want you to write it in the style of this. Here's an example of another webinar we did. And probably 5 minutes and this was done. I had to make a little editing, but that was really beneficial. I think I tried the same thing on ChatGPT 3.5 and had much worse output. It really understood like how to do that and how to make it in the same tone and very specific and that kind of thing. And then like for this outline, I think I said something like, here's the event description. So I gave it back and said, here's what we're doing. And I want you to, and here's the audience. And I want you to make an outline for this. And then it added like a bunch of stuff like on the intro about like large language models, like a lot of background info. And so I said, take that out, consolidate these sections, add more examples about plagiarism and hallucination or whatever it is. And so, 15 minutes and it was, pretty good. And then I could focus on what I wanted to put or just edit a little bit here and there. So it's pretty powerful. So back to that for, well, I lost my train of thought, how that relates to source hallucination. But in my mind, I guess, I feel like I'm kind of using it as an internal writing assistant. I'm not using it to go out and get information from the world. I'm using my own knowledge, resources, or other tools, and we'll be doing more, trainings on specifically like literature review tools or uh, AI-powered search engines or those kinds of things. But I think that is really, personally, I think the source hallucination thing is really overblown by people who, for whatever reason, have some sort of interest in either like just sharing something that sounds controversial or I don't know, like maybe it's personally important to them for the type of work they do. I don't really see it as a huge issue because I know that ChatGPT, like I wouldn't use autocomplete to look for sources either, you know? So it doesn't make sense to me that this is such a problem, other than obviously it exposes people doing sloppy work that they're not actually researching, which, that's probably good to know. Any questions on that? On source hallucination, I mean, so the bottom line is just always fact check anything AI outputs. If it says anything that would be something that I can't, like if I don't also, if I didn't give ChatGPT that information personally, and it's like adding new information that could be citable, then that's always suspect to me. The same way as if an undergrad assistant was like, here's a bunch of stuff I found because I just happened to know about it. I would want to know where they got that and I would want to read it myself. Same kind of thing. So to me, it's just not that big of an issue. And it's definitely not something that would keep me from using ChatGPT because I just would not use it to search. Um, so practical applications, integrate ChatGPT strategically, get really good at prompting. I think that every writer is increasingly going to be operating as a prompt writer, meaning let's say that your specialization is like patient education articles, like for blogs, just making something up here, okay? If that's or even if it's like journal manuscripts or white papers or something, um, I believe, and this is just I don't know, where I see things heading, is that it's kind of going to be part of it baked into there and more expected that you are strategically using prompting in your niche and that you work on that and know how to do that. Or like say that yours is graphic design, that you know how to use those tools. Like if you're doing infographics or something, you know how to use those tools. Same kind of thing. That you're able to, or like maybe, you know how to prompt so you can add like a interesting explainer video to the content. And that's really easy to do, increasingly easier to do. So in other words, like your role is going to include this know-how. And a similar thing would be, something as simple as like being able to add hyperlinks to words within your documents. I don't know, like I remember before that was a thing and where that would be really I don't even remember when that happened. I just remember at some point realizing, oh, I can click on this word and I can add a link to something, right? That wasn't always a thing. It used to be like very much like more like a word processor. You're just typing words in a certain order. If you want to do anything like different, adding pictures, changing formats, that's like, whoa, you're going to break the thing. It's going to cause problems. You won't be able to email it because it's going to be too big and like it's messing up and like whatever, And now it's just like part of what we do. I think of it similar to that. I can't imagine or say what that's ultimately going to end up looking like. Probably a million different things, but I think it's similar to that in that it's just part of kind of the fabric of how we work. Finding what works for you in efficiency and content development like is going to be key because everybody works in different ways. Everybody thinks in different ways. Um, I definitely have my like specific ways that it's a very easier for me to work with less resistance within myself that are very important to me that may not be important to you or to anybody else related to my personality, what type of work I'm doing, how my mood that moment of the day, anything like that. So finding what works for you is well worth the effort. And my overall thought is that human writing and editing is not being replaced, it's actually being enhanced. And I think that human eyes and human subject matter experts are going to be even more important because if anybody can just generate content at scale, then what's the difference between anybody else's content at scale? People are really going to want to know from actual human beings. I want to know from human beings about anything I'm learning about that's not my subject area. I don't really care what ChatGPT says about it. I mean, even something as basic as like I don't know, a beauty regimen or something. I want to know about somebody. I want to see like their photos. I want to see like what they're doing, what their experiences are. I want to know their personality. I want to know, or whatever it is, right? And that's just something lighthearted, but definitely in content, health content, and medicine, we're going to want to know that whoever's writing this has the capability of like really understanding this and communicating it. So I think that it will probably replace a lot of maybe people who don't have that knowledge background, and just write content really quickly, like on freelance sites and things like that. I think it's in a lot of fields is going to be a lot more, or similar with like accounting, let's say you're a tax accountant. You could decry and say like, I'm going to be replaced by AI because everybody can do this. Or you can look at it like, wow, this makes it so that my subject matter expertise is so important because all these people are doing taxes by themselves and they're not going to know if the AI output is right or wrong. And I'm going to have to teach them to use the AI or teach the AI how to do it or teach people what's possible. Or maybe now they can like do more with their financial management because of making it simpler. And so they need to know what that even entails versus the old way. So it's kind of sometimes helpful to look at other areas, like other industries. Um, okay, so Q&A time now, and I really want to open this up for anything we can look at, or if you want to see something on ChatGPT, like on the 4 versus the 3, Dolly, which is the image generator, anything like that.
What you were just talking about, like drawing lines between like your inherent knowledge, like what you have from experience and what you're trying to build out. I kind of used that recently for, this nurse navigation that I'm trying to build, or this framework that I'm building. But my knowledge base tells me that, fragmented healthcare can be improved by nurse navigation. And so I asked ChatGPT to help me like draw the line between those, and like, how has nurse navigation been used in the past to improve fragmented healthcare? And there wasn't like nobody had made that exact comparison. There wasn't an article or anything like that, but it did provide me, I always say provide me very clear examples with sources cited, so that I can go to the exact article that it's pulling from. So it like pulled up 4 different articles that I was able to read through, and then I plugged them into Notebook LM and like had it pull information from all 4 of those sources also. And it just kind of helped me to distill that information into like I was able to take something that didn't have a line drawn between it and to make a line, I guess.
Yes.
That was
Yes,
a long.
wonderful. Great example, Liz. And we were talking about Notebook LM. Notebook LM is what it's called, right? And I saw your email about it. For those that don't know what that is, I personally have, I think when I looked at it, it was like the beta testing version or something. So it didn't have all the capabilities as now that you described. But I would love for if you want to just share what that is and like some examples of how to use it.
Yeah, and they have a really cool, they did a really great job on their marketing video. There's, you should watch it. When you look up the Notebook LM website, it's just on their front page. It's really interesting. But I learned about it from one of the local doctors that I was having coffee with the other day. And he said that because he's a GI doctor and he has a lot of residents who, work in the hospital and see round on his patients, and they're constantly asking him the same questions over and over because it's always a new resident coming in and learning the same stuff. And so he went to like the professional website, like it would be ACOG for OBGYN. I can't remember what it is for him, but and like all of the documentation about one specific like healthcare problem, like IBS. I don't speak very well about GI stuff clearly, but you know, like all of the documentation surrounding that, he uploaded it into a notebook. And these notebooks, you can connect 20 sources, not 20 pages, but 20 different sources into a notebook. And then once those sources are in there, you can ask questions of those sources. So for example, you know, I'm preparing a discharge summary for a patient with IBS who had an acute exacerbation. What medications should I, you know, be sure to add, or what follow-up instructions should I be sure to add that may not be, you know, on the discharge summary. So it's really cool that it can just summarize up to 20 different sources and then answer questions about them. And then it also, which is, it like pulls in the specific sources that were cited in that answer. So it may not have used all 20. It may have only used like 2 of them, and it'll just show you which sources it used.
Phenomenal. Is that a Google? It's a Google tool, right? Notebook LM?
He's a Google lover.
What?
He only uses Google tools,
Oh,
so
right, right.
I learned a lot about Google tools.
Yeah, I love Google also. Switching to Notion was a big, I was like, but I love Google Workspace. So it was hard for me to make that jump. But the idea of Notebook LM integrating nicely with things like Google Docs, Gmail, you know, or things, you know, where that works really seamlessly. And I think it's such a cool idea for example, if you are very niche specific in your therapeutic area and you use the same sources over and over. So like Megan, I know from experience this would work phenomenal for cannabis because there's a lot of like the same topics you talk about. You know, I think with any niche, like you probably write about the same things over and over. It would be great to have something like that. It would be great to build things like this for clients if they have internal documents that they are internal, like these studies are important to our brand and we want to create a year's worth of content about it or something like to have, you know, I mean, you could do so much content planning from something like that that would be great. I mean, there's so many applications. I'm going to look at the chat. I just saw we have several questions. Um, okay. Make sure okay. So great questions. On the costs, like for the voice transcription that you were talking about. Yeah. Great question. So, okay. The way that I have this set up is through, so I'll put it in here. So you guys have it if you want. And if anybody uses this, let me know. It's Thomas Frank is this guy that is made like a bunch of Notion templates for like, I guess, personal knowledge management and organization. He has this voice template and workflow that involves, so what I had to do was get a OpenAI key and put it into this workflow, which is Pipe Dream that like has the code in there. So, and then I have it set up, I record it on my phone, it goes directly to a Dropbox folder that automatically it gets transcribed through Pipe Dream. So I have to pay, he says in his templates it's the free version of Pipe Dream, but they changed things since he made those. So I don't know if he's updated that yet. But it does cost $30 a month on Pipe Dream to do that. But it's like so worth it to me. $1 a day plus like a few cents per transcript. I'm fine with that because I use it a lot. But the costs are related to the OpenAI, like the ChatGPT plugin, basically, that you have to pay for certain uses. I'm not as well versed on exactly the ins and outs of that. I just know that it costs me $30 a month plus a few cents per transcript, depending on how long it is. But it's still, I think I've done like a 30-minute transcript and it was still like, I don't know, 10 cents or something. So I don't really worry about it, but that's where that comes from. And then, and I do not think that you have to have ChatGPT 3 point, or like I don't think it matters which ChatGPT you have. I actually am not sure about that. No, I can't remember if you have to have the paid version for his voice stuff, but that's what I use. Other things I've used for speech to text have been Otter, just using Otter, and then which is like records meetings. It's really great if there's multiple speakers, but you can use it as a monologue device too. And another that I've used is Audio Pen, which has some other functionality that you can like change the style of the output, and it does different things there. And there's a free and a paid version as well. Yeah, APA format or like changing site reference formats, it can be really helpful for that. If you have like a list of 1,000 numbers for some reason, and they all have commas and you need to take them out, stuff like that. You can be like, do this to this data set, you know. Do I start new conversations for each project? Usually, yeah. And I try to like stay on that same. I'm still kind of learning for myself what works for me there. And the reason, so it doesn't keep track of the conversations. So like here on my ChatGPT, you can see like all these different conversations. It doesn't, when I'm in here, it's not adding information from a previous conversation. And so sometimes I will just leave that conversation, like that editing project that I was doing, I would just leave that conversation alone and come back to it and then like be doing other things. So that's really nice that it keeps track of what we were discussing. Great, Megan put the Notebook LM link there if you want it. I don't know why Otter put that there, but here it is. And voice in plugin, is that another speech to text thing, Liz, that you use? Very cool.
Yeah, it works across ChatGPT and Notion. So it's like a little plugin that you click on when like you have your cursor in the ChatGPT window, and then you just click on the little plugin extension, and it just starts recording your voice. So it's probably not as sophisticated as what you're doing, but it records voice to text into the window, and then I can just enter. So I can ramp.
Yes, I think I've used that too, and it can also talk to you. It was kind of disorienting for me. I was like, oh my God, you're talking to me, and this is strange. I stopped using it because you know how it's so long-winded? And I was like, I don't want to hear all this. I would rather read it, you know?
Yeah, I think they've updated it now because it does just dump it into Notion now.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna
So
have
it's like this
to
big
look
long
at that.
monologue that makes no sense, but then I just ask Notion to distill it into bullet points.
Ah, okay. So maybe I'm switching over. So don't get the Thomas Frank thing. Try that first. Yeah.
Simi, I know we're running out of time, but can you show us the Canva plugin, please?
Oh yeah. And if anybody needs to jump off, feel free, but we can keep, looking here at Q&A. So here's a Canva plugin. This is, I believe, part of, yeah, you might have seen on OpenAI released like a GPT store so that all these different, developers or anybody can use, like can make plugins. And I think that Canvas was part of that. So here's some like examples. I don't know. Let's say make what should we make it about? I don't know, just something. The impact of stress on our health. And then let's see what it comes up with and what we can prompt. I haven't really tried it. I tried it once. I was just helping a friend make a flyer and it was okay. It was not we did not end up using it. I think it's still kind of like in the starting phases. But let's see what happens.
And regarding the cost, so does this have to be with the premium version of Canva?
I don't know. I have premium Canva and I don't even recall setting this up. I think I accidentally did and I was like, oh, look, there's Canva in my ChatGPT. So I don't really know too much about it. I haven't. But let's see what it did. This looks pretty cool. I mean, how fast was that? Like, So this is, I guess, pulling up my Canva. It's a little slower because of the Zoom and stuff, but I'll zoom into this. Oh, cool. So it just has like the lorem ipsum, whatever, and you can change the text here. But like, you could easily go to ChatGPT and be like, I want to, what should I put here? Or give me some ideas or something, right? So I've also used ChatGPT to come up with Dolly prompts where I'm like, this is an article and I want it to be a prompt for Dolly, but I don't want it to be like weird or scary, looking, because that to me, Dolly makes some like scary looking stuff. I want it to be kind of like this. Give me some ideas for like symbolic images or something, so it's not so, I don't know. And I've gotten good results that way. I think it might have given a different, oh, wow, it gave like several different
So do you think they're all
ideas.
like custom illustrations, or like does it take like a template or something?
I
And just
have
gives you
no idea. I don't know how Canva is doing it. If these are existing templates, or like, are you saying, are they existing templates that Canva already has, or
yeah,
is
like
it
it's,
making like
let's
a
say if the
new?
illustrations or icons are like AI generated, or if like it just
Yeah.
gave you like plugged in the little like subtitles for the
Hmm.
heading.
That I don't know. Um, I was just trying to see if I could like immediately see if these are one of the templates. So great question. I don't know much about it, but if you find out, let us know in the community. I don't use Canva a whole lot to like need to know that. But I think that, yeah, I mean, this could be a great way to just quickly add a infographic to your assignment, or your projects, if you wanted to, or for,
Portfolio.
yeah.
Yeah, really cool. Thank you.
Mhm. I think you can also be more specific if you're like, and you could use ChatGPT and be like, I want to come up with a plan for an infographic using the abstract of this study or something, right? Or using this information. And then it will do that. And then you could probably put that prompt into Canva to get a more targeted infographic.
Thanks so much, Simi. This has been super, super helpful.
Yeah, thank you. And as always, the community is there. So if you have like tools that you're using, or you find out something, you think that other people would benefit from, or you have a question, don't hesitate. Let's talk in there about AI, everything, and whatever you've got going on.